Welcome to this explainer. Let's dive right in. Today, we're unpacking the absolutely mind-bending insights of cognitive scientist Joscha Bach. What makes his perspective so incredibly unique is how he bridges the deep, philosophical waters of cognitive science with the absolute bleeding edge of artificial intelligence. We're going to be mapping a fascinating journey today, starting all the way down on the inner workings of our individual minds, and then zooming all the way out to the massive, complex societal superstructures we all live in. It's a really profound look at exactly where we are right now and where we're headed.
To make sense of such a vast intellectual terrain, we're going to use this quick roadmap. First, minds, machines, and consciousness. Second, AI, reality versus doom. Third, institutional decay and capitalism. And finally, building a better future.
So, let's kick things off with part 1, minds, machines, and consciousness.
Now, what's really interesting here is that before we can truly understand artificial intelligence, we absolutely have to strictly define what intelligence actually is. Bach defines it very specifically. You see, it's not just your ability to deploy a skill you already know. Think of it like driving your daily commute. You can almost do that on pure autopilot. True intelligence is the ability to acquire new skills in completely unseen situations. Researchers call this being out of distribution. Imagine successfully driving a massive, completely unfamiliar vehicle, like a heavy-duty snowplow, through a sudden blinding blizzard for the very first time. It's all about how well you can quickly build a mental model of a completely novel environment just to gain control over it.
And honestly, this hits the nail on the head when it comes to the core difference between us and machines right now. Human intelligence, we optimize for coherence. We learn from super small amounts of data, basically our limited life experience, and our brains desperately try to make everything fit together without any contradictions. Machine intelligence, specifically large language models, optimizes for prediction. They literally require petabytes of data just to mathematically guess the next word or token. Because these mechanisms are just so fundamentally different, making direct IQ comparisons between humans and current AI is basically impossible. We're dealing with two entirely different strategies for navigating the world.
Yet, despite all these differences, something absolutely incredible happens when we look under the hood. Through this fascinating new field called mechanistic interpretability, researchers are essentially doing brain scans on artificial neural networks, and what they found is called the universality hypothesis. It turns out that the universe might only have a few optimal ways to actually solve a specific problem. So whether you're using biological evolution or silicon algorithms, models optimizing for the exact same problem grow the exact same internal structures. Astoundingly, the math inside artificial vision models naturally evolves to strongly resemble the biological primate visual cortex. There's no way around it. The underlying structures of intelligence often converge in these universal, deeply fascinating ways.
All right, moving right along to part 2, AI, reality versus doom. Let's see how our understanding of intelligence impacts the current narratives we see around AI. We constantly hear this overarching existential fear, right? Are we breeding a successor species? Is AI this competing intelligence that will eventually fight us for resources and just eliminate humanity? Kind of like how we diminish the habitats of other large apes. Is that terrifying sci-fi scenario actually grounded in reality? Well, to answer that, we have to separate the hype from the reality and look neutrally at the financial incentives behind the panic. Traditional media organizations whose business models were, heavily disrupted by the internet are fundamentally incentivized to serve up outrage and doom narratives. Fear drives clicks. So they paint AI as this murderous, uncontrollable threat. But according to Bach, the ground reality is quite the opposite. Current AI is much more like a highly accessible idiot savant, or maybe a remarkably brilliant intern. It's cheap, it's heavily safety tested, and it's benevolent. And rather than causing massive unemployment, history consistently shows us that new technology tends to shift labor away from backbreaking, tedious tasks toward the things humans actually want to be doing. But what about when AI just makes things up? When addressing why these models hallucinate, Bach uses this incredible metaphor. He points out that large language models are currently trapped in a sensory deprivation tank. They only know reality through massive walls of text, totally severed from real-time external reality. If you put a human being in an isolation tank, well, they hallucinate too. But think about what happens once we give AI eyes and ears. Once we connect it to real-time sensory data through robotics or live video feeds, it simply won't be able to afford to hallucinate anymore. Its internal models will naturally correct themselves because they're going to be firmly tethered to physics and grounded in actual reality.
Which brings us to part 3, institutional decay and capitalism.
Having grounded our understanding of minds and machines, we now need to zoom way out to the macro level to examine our human superstructures, our institutions, and why they seem to be failing us right now. Bach points out a pretty terrifying trend here. Since the 1950s, polling shows a near-linear decrease in public trust in the U.S. government. Aside from a brief little spike around 2001, the trend is steadily, relentlessly downward. The stakes here are absolutely massive. If this trajectory continues, by the mid-2030s, we're looking at entirely negative trust in government. And when that happens, the shared consensus reality that actually holds democracies together begins to fragment.
And this decay isn't just isolated to the government, it's happening everywhere. Bach observes that as organizations become massive and quote-unquote too big to fail, they stop optimizing for objective truth. Instead, they optimize purely for internal political survival and ideological storytelling. Take modern universities as an example. According to this view, they've calcified and increasingly resemble an AI model suffering from model collapse. That's what happens when an AI trains exclusively on its own synthetic, garbage data instead of real-world information. They shift away from raw scientific discovery toward postmodernist narratives and ideological gatekeeping.
To understand how we allocate resources in this decaying system, we have to take a neutral look at capitalism and money. Now, it's incredibly easy to view money as some sort of evil construct, but functionally, it's simply a decentralized signal for anticipated reward. Bach beautifully describes it as the structural equivalent to dopamine. Just as dopamine motivates an individual organism to act and survive, money is the crucial mechanism that strings 8 billion talking monkeys together into a cohesive global superorganism. It is literally the thing that motivates us to trade, cooperate, and allocate resources efficiently across the entire planet.
This leads us to a purely objective case study in resource management, centralized versus decentralized allocation. Centralized systems rely on heavy regulation, massive administrative bloat, and endless committees. Think of the incredibly slow, expensive permission processes for housing in California, or traditional NASA rockets. These systems often calcify simply because they're terrified of failure. On the flip side, decentralized allocation is driven by market forces. It allows individuals and nimble organizations like Elon Musk at SpaceX, or even just a highly competitive local restaurant scene, to absorb risk, iterate quickly, and drive massive innovation. The agile system naturally routes resources directly to whoever proves most effective at actually using them.
Okay, let's get into our final section, Part 4, Building a Better Future. So, if our traditional institutions are decaying and calcifying, but AI is advancing at light speed, how do we actually chart a path forward? The true battleground of the future is going to be over who controls this new intelligence. Will it be top-down AI, a massive centralized system used by the state for ubiquitous surveillance, predictive policing, and reinforcing those outdated institutional gatekeepers? Or will it be bottom-up AI? Imagine having a democratic, open-source AI right in your pocket that serves you personally. A tool that drastically increases your individual competency, gives you direct access to deep medical or legal insights, and empowers you to bypass those failing institutions altogether.
Bach's optimistic countermeasure to the systemic decay of trust we discussed earlier is the formation of what he calls epistemic communities. Basically, these are groups of individuals who use personalized AI models to collaboratively map and understand reality together. This is absolutely crucial right now. If we can no longer trust top-down media or government institutions to provide a shared consensus reality, well, we have to build our own shared truth from the ground up. By sharing these models, communities can build an independent, highly resilient understanding of the world, completely outside of top-down indoctrination.
So, how do we actually implement this and build a better society? It starts with immediate, actionable steps from us as individuals. Step 1. You absolutely have to actively unplug from the outrage machine generated by traditional and social media. Step 2. You must deliberately seek out friction. Find smart people who contradict you in good faith. That is literally the only real way to synthesize a clearer, more accurate picture of reality. And finally, Step 3. Take personal responsibility to build resilient local networks. You start right now, from the ground up, with your own friends, your family, and your local community.
As you navigate this crazy, rapidly shifting landscape, you have to realize that we're caught in a massive tension between the frustrating decay of old human institutions and the arrival of this almost godlike new technology. And this technology, it's giving us the tools to bypass the old gatekeepers for good. So the ultimate question for you is this: what steps will you take today to harness this incredible technology, find shared truth, and build a more resilient community around you? Think about it. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the world around you.